Well, so I want to thank y'all for coming. Glad y'all are able to be here today, and we're going to cover some information, some of which you may be familiar with, some of which you may not have ever heard before ever in your life. And I hope I can give you some information that you've never heard before in your life, because that's kind of why we're here, right? I want to give you some things to think about, and some of them might challenge your previous thought processes, and that's okay. I want you to feel free to challenge my previous thought processes too, so whatever I throw out there, feel free to throw something back and say, hey, well, what about this? I want this to be an open dialogue where we can just kind of have a conversation about how, really it's going to be about how healthcare works in our country, and how health happens in each individual, because that's really the bottom line, is how can we stay healthy as individuals, because that's going to help the overall healthcare schematic in our society, right? So I want it to be a very interactive class, so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, and I want you to feel free to ask me questions. We're going to start out with a question, actually. So the first question I'm going to throw at you is, why do people go to doctors?
Because they don't feel good.
They don't feel good, right? And so what are they looking for from the doctor?
They're looking for help.
They're looking for help, right? So what, in the form of what, typically?
Medication.
Yeah.
They want to get relief, right? And this typically comes in the form of medication. Now, there may be other ways to get relief too. You might do physical therapy. But, you know, typically we're looking for relief of symptoms. That's what we want. That's why we go to the doctor. Now, are symptoms always a bad thing?
No, because they let you know that you got a problem.
Right. So sometimes symptoms can be a good thing, right? What types of things can cause a headache?
Weather.
Could be the weather, right? Barometric pressure change.
Food.
Food.
I have food allergies.
Or the lack thereof, right? If your blood sugar goes low, or if you
Yeah.
eat something that your body
Yeah.
doesn't agree with, okay? How about some other things? Insurance
Oh,
right
yeah,
there, right?
insurance.
Yeah, could easily do it. There's stress,
Yes.
okay? That's something that's common to all of us at some point or another, right?
Medication.
Side effect of medication. Sometimes the medication we got for the digestive problems creates a headache.
Do you know what? Painkillers make the top of my head feel like it's just going to burst open. I cannot take anything that kills pain.
Because it causes it.
Yeah, the
Ironically,
effects
yeah.
are worse than the pain. I've
Yeah.
experienced that. Yeah.
And then there's also, it could have a vision issue.
Yeah.
Right? What if you need to change your eyeglass prescription,
Yeah.
and you've been squinting to see whatever, that can cause a headache, right? We talked about food a few minutes ago. Could also be dehydration.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough water, your brain's going to fuss and say, hey,
Yeah.
I need some more water here.
Yeah, just like last week. A week ago today, I had to go have blood work, and I couldn't do it till 10:30, and by the time I got out of there, my head was screaming at me.
Because they had kept you
Yeah.
from having water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and eating anything. I could drink all the water I wanted, but I couldn't eat anything.
Okay. So then your blood sugar's dropping down, and
Yeah.
brain's not happy about that either. And for
Yeah.
ladies,
Oh.
menstrual cycles can do it too.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say.
And then there's the more severe things. Like, these are all things that we can deal with on a, we don't want to deal with it all the time, but those are they're not life-threatening, right? But what if we had a tumor? Or what if we had an aneurysm that was bleeding, right? Those can create a headache, but we need to do something about those immediately, right? Okay, so if we were to just take an aspirin or a Tylenol for one of those, are we doing ourselves more harm?
Probably.
We're good. More harm, right? Things are getting worse while we're just covering it up. And the reality of the situation is, when we're taking medication, are we fixing any of these issues?
We're covering it up.
Yeah, we're still experiencing the same problem we were experiencing before. We're just feeling better about it, right?
Right.
So at that point,
Could be adding on issues.
you could very well be adding on,
That's right.
So at that point, it may be better just to take a recreational drug, because they don't have as many side effects. I'm not advocating recreational drugs, but it's the same type of thought process, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We're just escaping reality. We're not actually changing reality. We're just escaping it.
That's right.
Okay. So that can be problematic.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's why I threw mine in the other room, because I knew if we get to come back to it. It's happened to me before, so don't feel bad. So the reality of the situation is, whenever symptoms show up, we need to find out what the cause of the problem is, rather than just trying to cover it up. Because if we cover it up, we're doing ourselves more harm than good. Now, rather than focusing on sickness, I tend to point my direction and my focus more on health. I'm going to kind of go through a thought process with you today several times over. I'll go ahead and start it right now, because it's a different way to think. And I'm going to start out with a philosophical question. Right? So, Does darkness actually exist, or is it merely the absence of light?
It's the absence of light.
Right? Yeah, because can you actually take darkness, pick it up, and move it somewhere? And if you had a room of darkness and a room of light, can you make the room of light dark by bringing the darkness from that dark room and putting it over there in the light room? You can't, can you?
No.
Right. So what's the best way to fight against darkness?
Bring in the light.
Bring in the light, right? Okay. You're fighting the darkness would actually be a losing battle because you can't actually do anything with it. You just have to bring in light. So you have to add more light, right? Okay. Now that we've got that established, I'm going to shift gears on you. Okay. So what's health? Any ideas?
Good health is light in action.
Say it again. It's like what?
Good health is like light in action.
Like light in action. Oh. Wow, thank you for segueing right into where I was, you're just going right down the road I was leading you down. That's perfect. We'll come back to that one for sure.
Well, is it the condition of your body, or?
Yeah, it would be condition of our body and in the ideal state.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the ideal state.
yeah.
And so to kind of enumerate some of the details that are involved in that, Webster says it's a condition of wholeness in which all the organs are functioning 100% all the time.
Yeah.
Now, can any of us be completely healthy? Is it possible on Earth to be completely healthy?
I'm gonna say no.
No.
All the
When
organs functioning 100%
God
of the time.
created the first human.
Yes. Yes.
But then,
In the Garden of
everything
Eden.
went awry
Yes,
in the
in
Garden of
the
Eden.
Garden of Eden.
In the Garden of Eden, you had two healthy people,
Yeah,
and then they allowed sin to enter the world, and
That's
so
right.
then we developed
they
a
chose
lack
to do
thereof.
their own thing rather than what God wanted them to do.
Perfect, perfect. Now, okay, so what they did was they let darkness in because they
Yeah.
separated themselves from the light, right?
That's right.
They basically put a wedge between themselves and the light, who is God, right? At the same time, they also put a wedge between themselves and health. Because at that same point, one of the punishments was death, right? We're all going to die. It's just a matter of when and how, right? So health is not, this much health is not a possibility for us, right? Where all the organs are functioning 100% all the time. We're not going to get there, right? Okay, so now here's my next question. All right, so you've already both hinted at it, okay? So does disease actually exist, or is it merely the absence of health?
See, it would be the absence of health, wouldn't it?
I think this disease exists.
In what form? Quantify it for me.
I think it exists.
Conceptually.
I
Conceptually.
think it exists how we respond to darkness.
Well, we can identify it, right?
Right.
But is it actually there? I mean, it disappears the minute we shed light on it, right?
No, it just makes it known to us.
Well, it makes us, well, maybe, I guess.
Makes us
it
aware of it.
Makes us aware of it, but we were aware we were in the dark before to some degree. I
Yeah.
mean, as long as there's some light somewhere, we're aware that we're in the dark. So, but the minute we add light, then the darkness starts to go away. And the same thing happens to quote-unquote disease. I mean, we can identify it,
Mhm.
but is it really something there that's physical, that's tangible, that's attacking us? It's not really attacking us at all. It's a lack of health. Okay, and I'll say, you know, some people are less healthy than others. Okay, sometimes it's based on lifestyle habits. Sometimes it's, you know, based on things that happen to us. Okay, because again, bad things didn't happen in the Garden of Eden, right?
No.
They do now,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes I think it's just the fact that we're in a world full of sin.
Yeah.
Okay? So what's the best way to fight against disease? Is it to, you know, throw things at the disease and see if we can make it go away? What's the best way to fight against disease?
Take care of yourself.
Go towards the light, right?
Yeah.
Let's add health.
Yeah.
So do whatever we can to add health, and then the disease has less room to exist there. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
right.
So conceptually, our society is all backwards. What do we do as a society? What's our primary focus in healthcare?
Go to the doctor.
Fight disease.
Yeah.
Right? Is that predominantly what we do? We throw drugs at it. If that doesn't work, we're going to cut out the diseased organ and get rid of it rather than trying to produce health in that organ.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So our healthcare is predominantly fight disease rather than build up health.
Yeah.
Whereas if we were actually to build up health, we could have a much more significant impact. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like when you go to the doctor, they don't try to get to the source of your problem. They just give you a drug to mask the problem.
Right. We're
And-
attacking the
and that,
disease.
you know,
Right.
And so you're not accomplishing anything.
Right. And as you said earlier, you may be making the problem worse rather than actually
Yeah.
making it better.
That's right.
Because now you've added a chemical into the scenario that may actually hamper the body's health more significantly than what it was hampered already.
Yeah.
So I think you're spot on. Both of y'all are spot on with that one. Now it's just a matter of continuing to keep a mindset of how can I build health amongst the society that's trying to teach us you need to fight disease. Okay? So, but health is our goal, right? So if that's our goal, there's certain things we need to lay down as far as groundwork to get there. Right? So those are the things we're going to talk about today. I don't want to focus on disease, I want to focus on health because that's our destination, that's our goal. Just like when we're talking about our relationship with God, communion with God's our goal. Right?
Yeah.
That's
Okay?
right.
The best way to escape Satan and his tentacles
Mhm.
is to run to God. Draw closer to God, and he'll draw closer to you.
Right.
So same story here. Now, not all of us have all of our organs. Okay, I talked earlier about sometimes we get them removed. Now, when we get them removed as preventative medicine, that's my problem. Okay, sometimes there's emergencies and you need to have things taken out. But oftentimes some of these organs are taken out as preventive medicine, right? So it used to be that, you know, if you're having any abdominal surgery, like ladies having a hysterectomy, right? Because they're done having children and that was the way of birth control that they chose. They would just take the appendix out because they were there, right? And if you don't have an appendix, then you can't get appendicitis. So that's preventive medicine. Well, the appendix actually produces lubrication for the colon. So you're
And
taking...
I've just had an answer, a question answered for me.
So you had your appendix removed years ago.
When I was 9 years old, mine ruptured,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was the death sentence. It's a miracle I'm alive,
Yeah.
but all my life I've had problems with constipation, so right there's the answer.
I'm sorry, it's been a mystery for so long. Nobody was telling
Isn't
you.
that
Huh?
something? 9 years old.
Wow, you are lucky. That's a blessing from
That
God.
was-
He had a purpose for you.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, the emergency care, the trauma care wasn't quite like it is now then. And that's one thing we've got a huge blessing of, is we've got the best trauma care in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a totally different conversation than the conversation we were having earlier. I don't want to get y'all confused and say, well, you know, medical care is just all wrong, we should never do it. We've got the best trauma care in the world, and
It has its
You have to have-
place.
you have to have
Just
trauma
like
care.
chiropractic care has its place, and you have to have enough knowledge and understanding to know which is which.
right, and enough understanding to be able to, and that's my
Yeah.
main goal with these classes, is to help you have an understanding
Yeah.
of the big picture, so
Yeah.
you can make choices that are going to help you accentuate your health. Right? So you can actively serve God more effectively, right? It's a lot easier to serve God effectively when we're
Right.
healthy than when we're sick, right? So that's my job, is to serve God's people, help them be well, so they can serve the
Right,
masses and
right.
spread the gospel, right? So not all of us have all of our organs, but we do the best we can with what we got, and that's what we want to do, is make sure that what we have is working optimally. Now, I'm going to kind of switch gears again. We're going to go to a different concept here. So we're going to talk about innate intelligence. Any ideas on what innate intelligence might be?
No idea.
Common sense.
Kind of like common sense, right?
I mean, something that you
Something
assume.
you intuitively know, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and innate intelligence is even a step beyond, because sometimes common sense, you know, we come to a conclusion, but it's still thought. Innate intelligence is something we don't even have to think about. Innate intelligence is actually your spirit or your soul, right?
Oh.
It's the thing that makes the world, your inside world, go round, even though you don't think about it, right? So how many times, James, did your heart beat last minute?
I hope enough.
Right, just enough. That's the best answer I've ever heard, right? So enough, it beat enough, right? Based on innate intelligence. Innate intelligence was telling it exactly how many times it needed to beat and how much blood it needed to beat. And so what pressure, right? Because you weren't
Right.
controlling any of that, were you?
Right.
Right? And if you were to go jog around the building, innate intelligence would be controlling it the whole way around, right? Ramping it up as you increase your speed and then slowing it down as you start to walk and come back in, right? And so we don't have to think about those things. It just happens. Day in, day out, same thing with breathing, same thing with digestion, right? Those things are just going, right? And so we can look at this God-given inborn wisdom of life and know that God has given us something from the beginning that kind of just controls this thing and keeps us moving. Now it's a matter of understanding how
God
it
is
works.
really smart, isn't he?
Oh, I'll tell you what.
But
Well,
this
and
is
I
lazy.
like to talk with patients about, you know, just from correction to resting room, and then after we get them up, they're like, I just can't believe the difference in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, the body can make that change. And I said, and the really cool part is, as awesome as that is, you're in the flawed machine, right? The one God made in the beginning didn't have all the same flaws. So that's really a testimony to the awesomeness of God. When you think about, okay, this is really cool what we got right now, but it's nothing in comparison to what was and what will be.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
So it's really an awesome testament to creation. Okay? So there's our lungs breathing too. So you get your heart, get your lungs, you got your digestion, it's all happening, you don't have to think about a single thing. All right, so let's go back to a point when we were all in the same situation, right? So one cell that came from mom, one cell that came from dad, and that those two cells joined together and became one, right? And so we were just one little cell, a twinkle in mom's eye, right? And that cell, okay, at which point God puts a soul in that cell, I don't know, but it may be right now, because that one cell divides into 2, and divides into 4, divides into 8, 16, 32, 64, and all those cells are mirror images of each other, right? And eventually what those cells are going to do is they're going to become a body, right? They're going to develop a body from that one little cell.
And it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
How God
And so,
can do that.
yeah, and so we're going to look at a little bit of the embryology. I'm not going to get you bogged down in it too much, but we'll kind of talk about the process and how this works. So this group of cells is going to become an organ system. One organ system to kind of start and stem everything off of. What organ system do you think is going to develop first?
It's fine.
It's going to be your nervous system, right?
Yeah.
Your brain and spinal cord. So your central nervous system is the first thing that develops, right down through the center. And in embryology, we call it the neural pore and the neural groove, right? And so that's going to be your origination point. Now, there's a bunch of stem cells that are all around those cells. I don't want to give you a false impression here. There's other stem cells in here too. And that's actually what the nervous system is going to be working through, right? So now the central nervous system is going to start to develop connections. So innate intelligence is at work. So we're developing connections to different areas within those stem cells, those groups of stem cells. And we're going to start to develop other organs from those stem cells, because stem cells can become anything they need to become, right? That's the beauty of stem cell research, is we can start to make different organs from these stem cells. And so now the nervous system starts to coordinate the use of those stem cells to produce lungs and a heart and a stomach and a liver and kidneys and all those organs that we need for function. Yes, James?
Now, some of those babies that are born have disability here, disability there, and so I'm thinking right away, well, if they could get this upper cervical at an early point in their life, maybe the alteration can take place, but maybe I'm kind of assuming or thinking that's a possibility, but it could reverse the process, like it's trying to reverse the process for me. Why couldn't it happen for a newborn baby, to reverse that process, to stop the negativity that's going on to the baby so it becomes more healthier? I don't know what the results of the negativity would do compared to turning that around and making it better, but
Yeah. And
that just, if it starts with the nervous system, well, you deal with it then. That's what I think.
Yeah, and if we're to intervene at a young age, which we do in a lot of cases, you don't know how bad it would have been otherwise.
Right.
You just
right.
know how much better it is now from where it was before. So, but yes, it's very important, vitally important.
What is the youngest person you've ever worked with?
Hours.
Hours? Really?
Now,
That's amazing.
let's see, the youngest one that wasn't my own was probably just under a day or right about a day. Okay.
Mm.
So they brought her in, they wanted to get her checked, and actually she was holding her adjustment. She was a home birth. And she was holding her adjustment, she did good. We'll talk more about the birthing process later, because that is vitally important, and kids are a passion for me, because like you said,
Mhm.
if you get them started from a young age on the right track,
Right.
then they don't develop all that momentum in the wrong direction, and they don't have to undo as much. But there are situations where, yes, kids are born maybe missing a kidney, or maybe a kidney's malfunctioning. And how much more important to make sure that their nervous system's working properly after birth, because, we're dealing with a world that's faulty. And so not everything is as perfect as it used to be.
And who knows that the mother didn't have some problems during the pregnancy, which could have caused
That's
something to affect the cervical.
So taking care of mama's nervous system becomes very important too,
Right,
doesn't it?
right.
Because she's the one that's kind of helping to
That's
build this
true,
baby with giving the baby the right conditions.
And then sometimes maybe a difficult birth could cause problems too, couldn't it?
You're playing right into my hand. I'm actually going to go through that in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about the birthing process and how it can be harmful. and we'll enumerate some of that. Yeah, it'll become very real. So we've got all these organs that develop, and now, out of all these organ systems, which ones are the ones that are completely surrounded in bone?
Which one's completely what?
Completely surrounded in bone.
The lung?
The lungs and the heart, right?
Right.
Completely surrounded by the rib cage. Well, are they completely surrounded?
Not completely.
Not completely.
but
It's
close.
pretty close, because the rib cage does do quite a good job, right? Are there any other organs you can think of that might be surrounded in bone? Maybe even more so.
Or your
Oh,
head.
the brain.
Right? The heart is going to remind us of the frontal bone. Yeah, so the skull actually surrounds the
The
brain
brain.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
nearly completely. Now there's a hole at the bottom, right? Probably about that big. It's called foramen magnum, and that's Latin for big hole. So that you have a hole in your head, right? Sorry to say, you all have holes in your head. That's a good thing, because that's where the brainstem comes out and then starts to feed into the spinal cord and become the rest of the nervous system throughout the rest of the body, right? So that's how the rest of your body gets the rest of the information it needs to understand how to work. And then your spinal cord is surrounded by the vertebral column. There's little holes on either side, but it's pretty well covered, right? So we have a very good protection for the central nervous system, which kind of lets you know the level of importance there, right?
Yeah.
You can figure out the level of importance based on the amount of coverage God gave it when He created us. And then you have the rib cage coming around. Now, the heart and lungs, last time I checked, are pretty important, right? Okay, so why wouldn't God give us a solid shield of bone right around there too?
For access?
For movement, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Movement, because as we breathe,
Expands and
it
contracts.
expands and contracts. So it's actually part of the awesome design as we think about creation. The way God built us, with those ribs separated and not one solid shield, is so we can actually expand and flex and
Right.
we can use those lungs most efficiently. Then we end up with our final product here. So, and that's just a few pieces of the wonders of creation, right? We could go through many, many other things and talk about how awesome innate intelligence is and how awesome God is in His design for who we are. We have to remember what makes us healthy on the inside, right? That's what's going to keep us well. We want our young children to grow up healthy, just like we've been talking about, right? So there's 4 basic things that each one of us has to have in order to live life at all. But we're going to have to do these things well if we want to live life in a healthy way. So what are the 4 basic things that we're going to need in life? Every one of us is going to need.
Well, food and clothing.
Food, okay, clothing's optional. But in a society, you're going to want to have clothes, yes, but you don't have to have it to live, right? You just do need shelter, though. You're going to need
Right.
a tree or something like that. However, shelter didn't make the list, right? So you're just going to have to find a tree and or dig a hole, one or the other,
Your
right?
health?
But you do need food.
Your health?
Say it again.
Your health?
Your health. Well, these are all going to contribute to your health.
Oh.
So like the foods that you choose, foods are going to contribute to your health. What's something else that would fit in the food category? You stick it in your mouth anyway.
Water.
Water, right? Okay. And there's something else we do on a regular basis.
Breathe.
Yeah.
We're going to need oxygen, right? So we need oxygen, we need food, we need water, and the 4th one is really tough. Okay.
Your organs, your main organs?
Well, you're going to have those, yep, in order to
That's not
get
it,
food. That's
okay.
not it yet, no. It's something that actually, if we went back on our diagram right here, we could go back far enough, we could find it. It was actually really close to the beginning of the origination there. So we had one cell and it multiplied and divided, and then we ended up with a system, right? What was that system? Do you remember?
The brain.
It was the nervous system, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have nerve energy, you're going to be at a loss. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to have nerve energy. And I would say the motor behind that nerve energy is your spirit, your soul. Right? Okay? Because the minute the soul leaves the body, what happens to the body?
Dead.
It's dirt, right?
Right.
We look just like the soil. Well, not immediately, but we're going to become just like the soil out there. And if you look at the consistency of the human body, we are animated dirt.
Right.
Our consistency is very much dirt. Calcium, phosphorus, potassium, we got all those things. We even got the bacteria that's out there, right?
Right, yeah. Got it
Here's-
all.
Here's an amazing thing. You have more bacteria cells in your body, well, contained in your body. They're not actually in your body, they're in your digestive tract. But you have more bacteria than you have cells. Isn't that an astounding fact? It almost sounds unbelievable, but that's the case. At least if you have a healthy gut, you have more bacteria than you do your own cells, right? So we're talking about billions and billions and billions of cells. Right? So the first thing you need is nerve energy. Because if you think about it, you can't even access oxygen if you don't have nerve energy. How do you breathe? We don't have to think about how we breathe, do we? We just do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's this muscle called the diaphragm. If you've ever been in music class, you had to use the diaphragm, right? You got to take a deep breath. Okay, so the diaphragm pushes the guts down and allows air in. right? Well, without the phrenic nerve from up here telling the diaphragm to contract, you don't bring in air.
Yeah.
So without nerve energy, you could have all the oxygen you want, and you're still not going to have access to it. So number one on the list is nerve energy. Okay? Stillborn baby has no nerve energy. The spirit has left, right? God's already called that spirit home. Right? And for those of us that are left behind, it's heartbreaking.
Mhm.
The child actually probably gets the better end of the deal.
Right.
You don't have to experience all the nastiness of this life. So, second thing we need is oxygen, right? We're going to put them in a hierarchy of order here, and then the next thing we're going to need is water. Right? If you're in a desert, you're going to need water before you're going to need food. And we talked earlier about kind of being dehydrated and how that would cause a headache. Well, we're going to talk about why right now. So, did you know your brain is 80% water? And not only do you have a hole in the bottom of your head, you're also waterheads, right? Don't let the water leak out the bottom, right? So you need to have
Floating
80%.
brains.
You need to have 80% water, and they are floating. That's exactly right. And that's part of the reason why there's water up there, right? If you think about it, I mean, we could get a concussion every time we banged our head on the cabinet, but we don't, do we? Okay? Because there's a whole watery cushion up there. We're floating, right? And if you think about electrical signals, well, there's a reason you don't swim in a pool during an electrical storm, right? Okay. Same reason you're going to use water up there to help send electricity around. Okay? So we need to be well hydrated, otherwise our brain's going to fuss and say, look, I'm unprotected and I can't communicate as well as I'd like to, so you better do something about it. So sometimes a headache is a signal that says, hey, why don't we just fix this problem rather than, and some people get better when they take an Advil because they drank some water with it, right?
That's true.
Advil didn't actually do it. They just drank the 8 to 16 ounces of water with it, and wow, I'm better. This is great. I may not have been an Advil at all. All right, so muscle's 75% water, blood's 90%, even bone is 13% water. So it's very important to make sure we're getting an adequate water content, which is half your body weight in ounces. So you take your body weight, divide by 2, that's how many ounces you're supposed to drink per day, which is going to end up helping you stay at about 75% of water content in your body. And then the last thing on the list we need is food. Now, food, that just means make sure you get a well-rounded diet, right? Start
Doesn't
out your
mean any
day.
food.
Well, it doesn't mean eating food, it means eating the right foods, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but we start out our day with a well-rounded diet. You know, we start out with Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast, and then Taco Bell for lunch, and then McDonald's for dinner, because that's, you know, different food groups, right? We got,
And the potato chips in between
yes, for snacking.
during
So I don't need to tell you all what to stay away from, do I? I know what to stay away from. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Now, occasionally we're going to run into a situation where we don't have an opportunity to go get some food, and maybe we have to go get some Burger King or something.
Right.
As long as it's not our mainstay, it's not our normal habits, we'll be okay to have those things every now and then. We need to make sure that what we're doing on a regular basis is healthy. What Dr. Chestnut was talking about earlier, the more we can add those healthy habits into our lifestyle, you know, it's going to help to accumulate into some positive momentum for our health. So,
You know, excuse me for interrupting, but my body is to the point that if I eat donuts and all these things that are not good for you, I don't feel good. I really don't. I don't want all that stuff because I don't feel good when I eat it.
and it's good that you're tuned into that, because a lot of people that are eating that stuff, they don't feel good, but they're so programmed into feeling that way all the time, they don't know any different.
Yeah.
They don't know any different. They're wondering why their health's declining. They don't realize, because they're not stepping back and looking at the big picture, they've been feeling bad for years. They just can't tell the difference anymore
Yeah.
because that's constant.
Yeah.
So that's a testimony to how well you've been focused on staying well, staying healthy, because it's an active thing. It doesn't just happen by accident. A lot of people are just looking for health to come up and hit them on the head and say, hey, here I am. But it's not going to happen. Health happens on purpose.
Well, I'm very blessed that when I was in my early 50s, I had hypoglycemia for years. And, you know, the medical doctors did not recognize it back in when I was going. But I got down and I went to a lady doctor that got me on the right track, eating right, eating brown rice instead of white potatoes, sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes, brown rice instead of white rice, and, you know, my vegetables and everything.
Was that Carol Roberts?
No, that was in Miami.
Oh, it's in Miami,
And then
okay.
when I moved back here, I started going to the holistic doctor, and that will be 20 years in January that I've been under a holistic doctor's care, and it really makes a big difference. They get to the root of your problem rather than masking it with
Right.
drugs.
Let's see if we can figure out what the cause of the problem is and
Yeah.
fix it. Rather than, let's just change something here rather than trying to cover it
Yeah,
up.
that's right.
So now, out of these four things, right, which is the one that you know the least about? As far as how to
Nerve
protect your,
energy.
right? Because you know
Yeah.
that you might need to filter your air, or
Yeah.
have an air purifier or something like that. Make sure you're not setting up housekeeping right next to a factory that's spewing out stuff into the air, right? And you want your water to be as pure as possible,
Right.
and you know what foods that, for the most part, what foods to stay away from, right? But who's ever talking about nerve energy? And which one's the most important one?
Nerve
The
energy.
nerve energy.
I guess we better talk about it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're gonna spend the rest of our time talking about, is nerve energy. So, this is our autonomic nervous system. So this is the stuff that happens without you thinking about it. There's all kinds of things that happen because we think about it, right? We can move our fingers, we can write a letter, we can, do all the things we do all day long. Okay, but it's all the things that are happening while we're doing all those other things that are really cool. Because you didn't have to think about it.
We feel with them.
Well, you can feel with your
things.
fingers, yeah.
But the nerves help you to feel,
Yeah.
don't they?
You know, everything, I mean,
Yeah.
and there's different nerves for different things, so,
Right.
right, so you have one nerve pathway that just feels temperature, right at that little itty bitty spot, and
Right.
there's another nerve right next to it that feels temperature, and then at that same little itty bitty spot, there's a nerve that feels pressure, and there's also a nerve that feels, this and that, and
It's
then there's the nerves
amazing.
that actually make things happen, and there's nerves that
Right.
control your blood vessels, and so, there's billions of nerves traveling right through here, going to all these different areas of your body so you can feel and interact with your environment, right? And the most important nerves aren't the ones that are coming out to tell your body what to do. They're actually the ones that are sending information into your brain so your brain knows how to react with the world around you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's a dysfunction called disafferentation,
Mhm.
okay? And the afferents, okay, will be the ones that are coming in and bringing information into the brain, telling your brain, okay, this is what's happening in the world around me. So if you have disafferentation, guess what? You can't figure out what's happening in the world around you because you can't sense and perceive it properly, right? That's a big problem, right? All I'm going to be talking about here is stuff that your brain is creating to happen. Really, it's just the brainstem. This is just a small part of your brain that's being used to create all this stuff. All this area up here, all this empty space, right? All that space up there, we don't use a lot of it, really. I mean, a lot of it's for the things that we do consciously, right? Either thought processes or moving our hands, feet, and walking around, right? But the stuff that we don't have to think about all happens in this small little area right here, right? Okay, so we have signals coming from the brainstem going down to the lungs so we can breathe. And we also have signals at the same time coming down to the heart so we can beat that oxygenated blood throughout the body. And at the same time, we also have signals coming down to the stomach so we can digest our food, the peanut butter jelly sandwich we just ate. Hopefully not. All right. And then we also have signals coming down to the liver so we can filter out the blood, clean everything out. And signals coming to the salivary glands and the eyes, and signals coming down to the pancreas so you can regulate your blood sugar and also create all the digestive enzymes you need to digest that food. You also have signals coming down to the small intestine so you can absorb all the nutrients you need. Signals coming down to the large intestine so you can absorb all the water. And you don't have to think about a single thing. Right? It just happens. Yes, James?
Can that nervous system affect the mental health of a person?
Absolutely. Actually, that was some of the first research that B.J. Palmer did when he was working with upper cervical. He actually had a mental health clinic. And he was taking on psychiatric patients into his clinic, and that was particularly what he was working on and really focused on for a good many years. He had a sanitarium, and it has a huge impact. And if we talked about some of those things, serotonin, dopamine, and all these different chemicals, because really, the nervous system is a chemical factory. Okay, you can think about the pituitary gland that's sitting right here at the bottom of the hypothalamus, and those are both incorporated into the endocrine system, which is all your hormone balance and regulation, right? All these different chemicals create the different mental states that we exist in, right? So to speak, exist in, I don't know, that we live in, right? So those different mental states can be changed based on the chemistry. And so sometimes something as simple as disafferentation, where the signals are coming up, we got bad input, you're gonna get bad output, right?
Yeah.
Because then all of a sudden somebody ends up in a bad mental state that they wouldn't have been in before. Now, I'm not saying all mental problems result from upper cervical misalignment, don't get me wrong, but that's one cause,
Yeah.
right? And it's definitely not going to help the scenario if somebody that has some other chemistry issues from some other dysfunction, if they have an upper cervical misalignment, it's just going to accentuate it and make it worse, right? Okay. So all these things we don't have to think about. Okay, they're just going day in, day out, as they're needed, right? Sometimes your brain turns them off to turn other things on, and then turns these on again later on, right? If you had to think about all these things to stay alive, how long do you think you'd live? They've actually done research on this, right? So 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes is how long we'd live if we had to consciously think about all those things and make them work. And I think that's the ladies, because ladies are good at multitasking. I think guys, we'd only last 3 minutes. I don't think we'd make it. Hey, oh, I forgot about my heart. Oh, what's going on here?
We're gonna
Something
talk
was
about
wrong.
this later.
You know, it's just unbelievable as to how,
It really is. And the only time we think about typically these types of things is when they go wrong, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, as long as everything's going well. You just take life for
You
granted,
do.
and you don't give God credit for anything.
Yeah, so it's good to take a step back for a moment and just think, okay, wow, what all is going on in my body? So it helps us give thanks, right? It's that time of year anyway.